I'm B. Kraus, and I'm interviewing Shirley Rechtman, who is a granddaughter of Sam and Golda Fishman. Shirley, I want you to share with us the first memory that you have of being with your parents. You know, the first family memory that you have.
The first memory I have of being with my parents was living on Snedeker Avenue in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 uncles, a grandmother, a grandfather, my father, mother, and I. They took the living room, they changed into a bedroom, so that's where I slept with my parents. Abe and Harry shared one single bed. Morris slept in one single bed in the same room. And Max slept on an Aufstellbett in the kitchen, a cot.
And what was it like living with your grandparents?
I forgot to say that my grandparents slept in the other bedroom, suffisance, you know, the head to toe, because it was a single bed. One bathroom, that's very important. Even at that time, a bathroom was very important. And I had many accidents. Someone was always in the bathroom. And Abe Fishman was the one who always helped me, because I didn't want my mother to know, because she never hit me or yelled at me, but she looked at me. And while he was cleaning me, I say, don't tell Mama, I don't want her to look at me. It was wonderful living with my grandparents. I adored my grandmother. I spoke Yiddish better than I spoke English at that time, before I started school. And the house we lived in was a 2-family house with the upstairs. They had 4 children, and it was one big house, and it was very friendly, and I adored my uncles. I remember the first dream I had was of my Uncle Abe Fishman. And I dreamt that he was burning to death. And I was screaming, and they came over, look, I'm alive. No, you're burning to death. So that's my first memory. Saturday night, the family would get together in that house. Some men would play pinochle, some people played gin. And all the children, Bee and Irving and Saul and Jack and I would play in one of the bedrooms.
Hold the mic near your mouth. We
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I just want to build on that. First of all, I remember one night with that gathering, I remember my father sitting there singing Apapupchik, whatever the name of that song is. And of course he had a beautiful voice, and I remember that. And I also remember, and I wonder if you remember, the night that we were playing hide and seek, and I think that was when that family was at our little apartment. And I went into the bathroom, there was a shower curtain there, and I hid behind the shower curtain, and then a man came in, and it was somebody that we know, but I can't remember his name, and you remember? And he came in, and I said, wait, it was very embarrassing, and it's all your fault. Okay.
That was our relationship. Everything was my fault.
Yeah, she was a little younger.
Jack was the youngest.
Jack was the youngest, yeah. That's the one that we picked on. Of the boys there, was your favorite? As you said that Abe was the one. Did you have a favorite, and why?
My very favorite was Harry. Next came Abe. Morris was seeing Gussie at the time, so he wasn't around too much. And Max wasn't as friendly as the other three, boys.
Quiet.
Harry was 16 years older than I, and I idolized him. And I can't talk about him because I still miss him. A babied me. If I wanted something, I got it the next day. I mentioned that I wanted a puppy. The next day there was a puppy in the kitchen. I jumped up on the kitchen table and I said, "Get it out of here, get it out of here." He was so mad at me. Well, the next few, Shirley Temple was the actress of the day, and I said, I wish I had a Shirley Temple doll. And the next day there was a Shirley Temple doll on my bed. And to the day he died, A wouldn't tell me who bought me that Shirley Temple doll. I tried to find out. Gussie was a very important part of my life. I adored her, I worshipped her. She came every Sunday, and Bubby made fried steak and onions. I don't know if I was happy that Gussie was coming or that I was going to eat fried steak and onions. Gussie had beautiful hair, and they played cards, and she let me play with her hair. And I became a hairdresser in my own mind. I became ill at that time, and they thought I had polio, so I had a day nurse and a night nurse, and I was quarantined, and I would only take medicine if Gussie gave it to me, so every 4 hours she had to come over. Luckily she lived close by to give me my medicine, and it turned out that I had pyelitis. That's a kidney.
Do you remember the day that they brought the B. Oliver Sholem home from the hospital?
First of all, when she was in the hospital, my mother shared a room with someone, and that lady also gave birth to a daughter. And she left the day before. She was supposed to leave a day before my mother. And when she was dressing her, my mother took a look at her and she had beading. They switched.
Not funny, but.
And my mother started screaming, "That's my daughter, that's my daughter." And the lady looked at her and said, "Who wants her? She's so ugly." So my mother said, "So was my other daughter, Shirley. Come to the window and look at her now." So she looked out the window. She said, "I can't believe it." So a month later, she came to visit us. And she said, "You're right, she changed. She's not ugly anymore." I was the only one who had a baby sister. And I became very popular with my friends, and they wanted to look at her. And so I made them stand in line and wait and take turns going to the crib to look at my sister. She was a brat. She must have been colicky because she cried day and night. And Max would scream, "Shut that kid up!" And I would shake her crib and sing lullaby. And when she finally fell asleep, she started to cry. Max said, "Of course she's crying. You're singing too loud." I expect her to go to sleep. My mother didn't nurse me, so she had to wait for the milkman to come. He came not in a truck, but in a horse and carriage. And you could hear the horse coming down the street, 3 o'clock in the morning. She'd get up and make formula. And that's where I remember. Oh, and everywhere I went, as my sister grew up, I had to take her with me. So I was sick and tired of having B with me wherever I went.
Now the truth comes out.
What was the last thing that you remember of Golda? And by the way, what did you call her and what did you call Sam?
Golda was my Baba, and Sam was my Zayden. Golda and I listened to the Jewish soap opera, but in those days there was a beginning and an end to the soap opera, and when it was over, they produced it on a Jewish theater on Pitkin Avenue, and she always took me with her to see the shows. She took me shopping with her, and I spoke Yiddish so well that they called me the Gleaner. And the Gleaner, meaning the immigrant. Yeah. And I enjoyed going to the butcher especially. I loved the way they cut the fat away from the meat. I was fascinated by that, and they thought I should become a doctor one day.
Not a butcher.
Not a butcher. She died suddenly when we lived in a different apartment at the time. As each uncle got married, we moved to a smaller apartment, if that's possible.
Alabama Avenue.
Yes, and Alabama Avenue was just Abe and Harry. And then Abe got married, we moved to Wyona Street, that's where Harry was with us. Wyona Street, yes.
And Gussie and Mars.
Gussie and Mars were married. I'm jumping around.
Tell us a little bit about Lou, about your father.
My father and mother also met at a dance. I don't know too much about how they met. He came from a family of 6 sons. His father lived in Ellenville, and he lived with his 3rd wife. His first wife died in Poland, and he left Poland and he left his son with his grandparents, and he moved to England. And that's where my father and the other boys were born. They came to him, his second wife died at the birth of they had twin boys. So one survived and one boy died. And then they moved to Bronzeville, where my grandfather married a relative. And they had to put the boys in an orphan asylum because he couldn't take care of all the boys and work. He was a shoemaker, yeah. So she decided she's not going to have any children. She's going to devote her life to taking care of the boys. It was a very difficult time for my father and his brothers. When they married, when she married my grandfather, they took the boys out of the orphan asylum. So, and then much later on, the boy who was left in Poland came to stay with them also. I don't know much about how they met at a dance, and my grandparents were against the relationship because they had someone else in mind for my mother. The boy they had in mind for my mother was a European boy. My father was an American. My mother was very flattered that an American boy was interested in her, so of course she chose my father. I don't know where they were married.
Probably at 572.
Probably at Golders.
At Golders, I have no idea.
Get their marriage license like she did.
Let's bring it up now to you meeting this very, very fascinating, handsome, dynamic Charlie Frank.
I was taking accounting in college, and I had to work. So I looked for, I wanted to work in a one-girl office. And Charlie and two men started this shoulder pad business. And I went for an interview and I told them I was an accountant. I was a bookkeeper. I had no idea how to keep the books. The accountant interviewed me, and he believed me, and he hired me. And the accountant then went off on vacation, and I had to open the books for the firm. Fortunately, I had a cousin who was an excellent first-rate bookkeeper, and I was on the phone every day with her. And Charlie would say, "Are you talking to your damn cousin again?" Because he didn't know that she was teaching me how to keep the books. I didn't have an adding machine. I didn't have a typewriter. The accountant came back at the end of the month to audit the books, and we were 2 pennies short. And I had the 3 bosses helping me find the 3 pennies, the 2 pennies. And one of the bosses, Harold, threw 2 pennies at me and said, "Here's the 2 pennies, let me go home." And Shirley said, "No, don't do that. You want an adding machine? Keep them there Saturday and Sunday." So I always followed her advice, and Monday morning there was an adding machine on my desk.
Bring it up to the children, your children, with Frank, with Charlie.
Oh, well,
Got married.
I started dating Charlie. I lost my track.
When'd you get married?
Oh, he said, chances are we'll get married.
No problem.
Very romantic. And I was very much in love with him at the time. I remember I was especially, he had the most gorgeous eyes. And I said, okay. And he said, we'll get married a week after we find an apartment. Apartments were very hard to find in those days. And he went out every Sunday and looked for an apartment. And he called me, he said, I found an apartment, it was a basement apartment. And exactly 1 week later, we got married. And everyone in the family and all the people on the block that I lived on was sure I was pregnant. And Uncle Abe Waprinsky arranged the wedding. We got married in Charlie's parents' home. And just as he did for everyone else, Uncle Abe arranged my wedding. The reception was in a regular reception hall.
Mine too.
I wanted to say that Bea and I were flower girl for everyone who got married in the family. Well, our cousins and aunts and uncles. And Jack was the page boy. And
Except Sylvia, I don't think we were at her wedding. It was too fancy.
We can't
So
hear
we
the
didn't
little
stand up for
aside.
Sylvia.
We can't hear the little aside, they say.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the only wedding that we didn't stand up of the Morris Waprinsky family was Sylvia. No, not Sylvia. We stood up for Jeannie and for Rebecca, but not for Sylvia. She had other people. She was very fancy, and maybe we weren't fancy enough, I don't know.
well, we stood up for all my uncles.
I was a bridesmaid in Sophia.
Tell us about your children now. Who was born first, what they're doing.
Gloria was born first, and Gloria was born first, and Charlie would run home every night. I couldn't feed her or do anything without his supervision. The doctor said that she was colicky also, took after my sister. Day and night she cried for 3 months. We lived in an apartment building in Crown Heights, and the windows all faced the courtyard. We didn't have an air conditioner, and it was hot, and the neighbors used to cry also to shut that kid up. And he came home, and I was up day and night taking care of her, but he took over on weekends and took care of Gloria. She was brilliant, and we had a lot of fun with her. Then Steve was born 2 years later. We were in a different apartment at the time, and he was very mischievous. He would crawl out. We had moved to a house at that time, and I got up one morning. Steve was missing. He was still sleeping in a crib. He couldn't even walk yet. I couldn't find him anywhere in the house, and the phone rang, and a neighbor around the corner called. I looked out the window, and Steve is crawling along. He got out of the crib, opened the back door, crawled out to the front, crawled around the corner to my neighbor's. And I put him in a playpen at the time, and he whittled it so much he broke the playpen.
The next one says.
Lisa was born 5 years later, and the two older children were big babies. She was small. She didn't have. Oh, Steve was a wonderful baby. He never cried. I wanted to say that. Lisa was also a very good baby. She was beautiful, and at that time, Charlie got very sick. He had terrible backaches, and they didn't know what it was from. Turned out he was bleeding internally, and he hemorrhaged, and he almost died when she was very young.
Jump up to and dying
In 1965, during the World Series, Charlie was out in the garment center speaking to someone, and he dropped dead in the street in the middle of a sentence. We never knew whether he had a heart attack or a stroke. It was after, it was Erev Yom Kippur. It was called midday morning that he was buried. And
Tell us when you met Marty.
3 years later, I met Marty. And he was wonderful. He was a musician, and never married. And I didn't think we would ever get married. But he also said, "Let's get married." I had 2 very romantic proposals. So before he could say no, I called the rabbi and I said, "Rabbi, I think Marty's going to propose. Are you going to be free the next few weeks?" He said, "I'll cross everything off my list and I'll be ready for you." Well, when Marty said, "Let's get married," I said, "Let's go tell your sister and brother and her father before he changed his mind. I wanted witnesses." Lisa ran up to Steve and said, "Guess what? Mommy and Marty are getting married. We're going to have 2 television sets." We went to tell Helen and Ruby, his sister and brother-in-law, and his father lived with them. His father was very hard of hearing. And he took his father into another room and he told him, "I'm getting married." Lisa and I were sitting there, and he said to Marty, "To who?"
Should have said to whom.
Maybe. Helen said, Helen was going to kill him. She says, "I'm going to kill him." Anyway, I called the rabbi, and a week later, we got married. I said, "Rabbi," he used to have very long sermons, and Marty used to go to synagogue with me, and Rabbi said, "How does Marty like my sermon?" And I said, "Very interesting," but he says, "I know, too long." So when I told him that, we would get married, I said to him, "Please do me a favor. And don't talk too long because he might change his mind. So during the ceremony, he did what he had to, and then with a twinkle in his eye, he said, "I feel compelled to say a few words." And I gave him the dirty look, and he laughed, but he spoke very beautifully, very short too. And we just had a dinner for the immediate family. And Marty was with me for 21 years. He died in 1989 during his second open heart surgery.
Shirley, this was a wonderful interview. It was great. Now, would you just sum up your life for us?
I said I had 5 minutes left, not 5.
You didn't say a word about my grandchildren. I have
You say
6
that.
grandchildren.
Absolutely. You absolutely, especially you have the
Okay,
seven.
don't waste your time talking about the
Do it, you got 5 minutes.
Number 3. I have 6 wonderful, beautiful, brilliant, talented grandchildren. And I'm very happy to say that they love to spend time with me, and I always love to spend time with them. I would give them the option for their birthdays when they were younger, do you want a present or do you want to spend time with me? They always chose to spend time with me. And as each child, Ken to begin with, my grandchildren were Kenneth, Rebecca, Farrell, Evan, Morgan, and Justin. As each child became 13, I took them on a trip. Ken was the first, and Justin, who's 14 now, was the last. And they still choose to spend time with me instead of getting presents. And we went to London, we went to Disney World, we went to Hawaii, Alaska, Scotland, and those were the trips we took. I was very sad when my last trip was over, but I have a great-grandchild now, Kavi, and they say that if I keep going to the gym 3 times a week, I might be alive and well enough to take him on a trip when he's 13.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful.